it's Maggie from Tory Consulting, and today is Global Accessibility Awareness Day. Today we think about the more than 1 billion people that are affected by issues with accessibility and inclusivity when designing a product or a service for the general public. Today I've spoken with some amazing and inspiration leaders from the likes of Intopia, Xero, Vision Australia, the ABC and more to get their best tips and insights on how to make experiences accessible and friendly for everyone. What are some common misconceptions about accessibility?
One of the big ones is that it's hard.
This comes from accessibility not being considered from the outset. So if you've already created your app or your website experience and then you do an accessibility audit, of course, it's going to feel really overwhelming because there'll be lots of things that you won't have thought about. So actually, if you consider inclusivity and accessibility from the outset, so whilst you move through your design, build and test, then actually achieving an inclusive or accessible site is much easier and not too hard at all.
Particularly if we think about creating good components and good digital experiences, use the web the way that it was meant to be made.
Is color contrast, making sure that text, icons, graphics actually stand out from the background that you place them on. Otherwise, if you don't do that, people who have low vision or people who are just out and about on their mobile phones and they've got glare on their screen may not be actually able to read the text on your website or app.
Another thing is it's expensive. That's another one that we hear about a lot. Oh no, look, we can't do accessibility now, it's too expensive. It's not. Once again, think about it early. Tell you what is expensive. Not thinking about accessibility, not factoring in accessibility. You need to understand that 20% of the population, thereabouts, approximately, have a disability. And a lot of people may have, beyond that, may have issues using that content. And if these people can't use your website, can't use your apps, then these are lost customers. These are lost users. And I tell you, that's expensive.
And you might think, how could that possibly be? Every fifth person I see doesn't have a disability, I think. Well, 70% of disabilities are hidden. You can't actually see it from the outside. So a lot more people than you think actually have a disability. And it means that essentially, if you build an inaccessible product, you're going to be turning away every fifth customer or fifth client.
The misconception that if my product meets WCAG, then it's accessible. So WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and it's the standard that most organizations will reference when it comes to accessibility. And don't get me wrong, I'm actually a big fan of WCAG. Some of my colleagues call me the walking WCAG Bible because I can quote it, I can tell you the nuances of it. But we often, I guess, equate accessibility with WCAG, where accessibility is really, can I do what I need to do using this product in the way that I need? WCAG is great, it has some great guidance, but I have seen sites or apps that have met or are close to meeting WCAG and yet are not usable. And there's a very big difference between what we call that technical accessibility, which is WCAG, and what is often called usable accessible, which is making sure that that thing works. I can do that thing. I don't really care whether it conforms with the standard or not. I just want to do that thing.
You can, be really low on the usability end, but very high on the WCAG conformance end. So usability is still important, making sure that it actually works for the users. That was the whole point. That's really, really important as well.
The other one that sometimes we hear is people with disabilities don't visit my site, or I've had no one complain. So, someone might come to your site, have a poor experience and just go to the competitors, who might give them a better experience. They don't have to complain. They don't have to get in contact with you. And some people are, and I'm going to, I don't have a disability, so I'll be really, really clear about that. But I do know and have talked to some people that just get sick and tired of having to continually say, this doesn't work for me. So it is really just about good good user experience. And if we change our way of thinking into, this is just part of what we do, it's part of our quality product. It's no longer a additional add-on or something that we're like, oh my gosh, we have to do this. It's just something that we do in our everyday practice.
If you don't have the resources or the knowledge, then get training. Get someone in who does know from another organization and get them to walk you through how to do accessibility and then upskill and keep it up from there.
If you want to challenge yourself, spend a morning without your mouse when you're in front of the keyboard, and just use your keyboard and see how challenging it can be, and you'll very, very quickly learn the difference between a good experience and a bad experience on the keyboard side.
The other misconception, and probably my least favorite one to get, is that it makes the design not pretty. And this one pretty much drives me wild, because I just think it's so narrow-minded, and I think it lacks creativity. And if you've got a really good designer, they're excited by the challenge of creating an experience that works for everyone.
While the blind and low vision community are absolutely important and need, good quality websites, we also have to look at deaf and hard of hearing. We also have to look at cognitive impairments. We also have to look at the ways that people move and the way that people speak if they're using voice. So there's often a lot more to accessibility than people are first giving it credit.
Another misconception is that accessibility only helps people with disabilities, and that's not true. Something I'd suggest you look at, Microsoft came out with a toolkit called Microsoft Inclusive, and they showed how for people who have a disability, getting it right and solving the problem for people with a disability, in fact, solves the problem for lots more people with temporary impairments. Say, for example, somebody who has one arm, well, they have a permanent disability. And if we solve the problem for that person, then we also solve the problem for somebody with a broken arm or maybe a sprained wrist who may have trouble using a mouse too. And we also solve the problem for somebody with a situational impairment. The common example there is somebody holding a baby, holding a young child. They don't want to put the child down, but they do want to move around their computer keyboard with one arm.
Australia has an aging population. So at the moment, I think it's about 15% of the population is over 65. So that's quite a large percentage, it's 2-3 million, whatever it might be, people. And of course, you don't just stop using the internet when you hit the age of 64 and clock off. And like I said, that group is growing. By 2030, it's supposed to be up around 20% of the population. So it's always getting bigger. It doesn't include, or another group that benefits hugely from accessible content and design are people with dyslexia, but obviously that isn't deemed a disability, but that's up to 10% of the population. People with low literacy or literacy issues. It could be people who English mightn't be their first or native language, so they really benefit from accessible design as well. And obviously that's not counted in the initial 20% of long-term disability. And then even things like color blindness. So obviously color blindness isn't captured or deemed a disability, but it's 5% are colorblind. So like we were just mentioning before about supplementing color with text and things like that, that's a group that is affected. So an accessibility requirement is that all video has to have captions. So if people were deaf, they're able to read the dialogue and the content that's going on. But similarly, people who can hear, but they may just be in a noisy environment or at the gym or on the train and they want to listen to the news or whatever it is, captions are brilliant.
The problem is that people too often think about accessibility as something that we do simply to help people with disabilities. We've already seen it's not a small percentage. Getting it right means that you've simply got a better product that's more usable for everyone.